Before I'd gone to experiment with the St. Lucie grass and Bermuda grass, the winter had so far gone that the wildflowers were coming into bloom in rapid succession. In November I found violets and some other exquisite flowers here and there about the lake, but about the 1st of March the procession opened amazingly, and by mid-April I had made up my mind that I would rather have this wildflower garden than any lawn that was ever graded with bluegrass or any other grass. Wonderful and beautiful, they made a substitute far beyond my conception of wildflowers. I had lived in Missouri and Illinois and Michigan, but I had never seen anything to equal this display. Legumes of all sorts, several varieties of sensitive plant, flowers as exquisite and large as sweet peas, 2 or 3 kinds of dandelion and coreopis, and I know not what else. You see, this 10 acres of mine had not been burned for over 14 years, and there had been accumulating all the time bird-sown seeds of everything collectible in Central Florida. Now, after I've built my house, although I have 2 large beds for roses, cannas, gladioli, etc., still these wildflowers are not ashamed of themselves, resting their arms and their heads on tufts of grass or huckleberry bushes, and looking up to me with a pleasant greeting every morning. Grandest of all was the Cherokee bean, an exquisite bush, out of which springs all through March, April and May long stalks of the most brilliant carmine flowers. Most of our wildflowers have bulbous or large roots of some sort on which they can feed during the dry spells. Turtles rapidly disappeared after we began cultivation, and so did the rest of the wild animals. Rabbits still linger where they can find a neglected corner, or they are doing very little mischief. One of the turtles, which the natives call the gopher turtle, has a hole on a slope about 45 degrees into the sandy soil, out of which he comes at about 11 o'clock in the morning for a lunch on almost any vegetation he can find. These holes vary from 4 inches in diameter to 20, and the inhabitants vary inasmuch in size. A well-grown turtle will weigh about 10 or 12 pounds, and of course an unwelcome visitor in a patch of green peas. It is an easy matter to catch these fellows by planting boxes just under the mouths of the holes. As they make their exit for dinner, the clumsy fellows tumble into the boxes and cannot get out. They make excellent feed for hens, and the gopher turtle is a welcome addition to a vegetable diet in soup or stew. Foxes we occasionally hear in the distance, and they have been known in our hen yards. The real gopher is not a turtle at all, but a ground squirrel with pocket jaws, and a mighty busy fellow he is, ploughing through your garden or yard. Every few feet he throws up a heap of dirt, and then tunnels forward, going several rods in a single night. It is very interesting to watch him bring up the dirt from below his pocket jaws and dump it out in an orderly way. The ground mole here, as in the north, is not at all an enemy, although he has the credit of doing all sorts of mischief. The fact that he lives on grubs and is of decided economic value. The real gopher or squirrel is the only pest that we have difficulty in controlling. He is fond of sweet potatoes, and his raids are sometimes very destructive. On the whole, the enemies to our vegetation are not very seriously troublesome. We mowed the weeds and made huge piles for compost, just as we would in the north. The folks advised us to burn it, but we refused to do so. Florida has, for time out of mind, been burned over once a year until there is hardly a shovelful of humus to a square rod. Nitrogen can be so easily obtained by ploughing under legumes that the loss of this element is not so badly felt, but there is a need for more phosphorus and potash. You would suppose that the ash left by the fires would supply the potash, but the ash of the pine needles and scrub bushes leaves very little except a bit of carbon. As a substitute, the gardeners and farmers buy commercial fertilizers, which they are compelled to spend at least 1/3 of all their earnings. This stuff is little more than a gad for a worn-out soil, and like a whip to a worn-out horse, can only serve for a little while. Instead of following our neighbours, we began at once making soil and humus, that is, incipient soil. No state of the Union furnishes more annual material to make soil and to fatten it than Florida. There are legumes of all sorts, from 3 inches high up to the velvet bean, which grows 70 feet in a season. These can be mowed for hay or silage, then foddered and finally ploughed under. This adds an enormous amount of raw material for soil making, and the nodules of the roots furnish a splendid deposit of nitrogen. Results that count. In a compost pile of half-fermented stuff, we grew a sweet potato weighing 18 pounds. Placing this on exhibition, we left it for an argument, better than words, against the plan for burning up the material we had used for the compost pile. Into such a pile, one may throw any sort of wasting stuff, even pine needles. Comminute all of this with sand, and at the end of the year, and work it into your garden for soil. We found pile after pile to be accumulating, and in the course of 3 or 4 years had better success with vegetables than could have been secured by the use of fertilizers. This annual burning over the state is very startling to newcomers. Early in January, we saw the west of us a huge fire sweeping under the pine trees and flaming up to and among the limbs. It was a terrifying sight, to which, however, we soon became accustomed. We found that there were fire lines about houses and orchards made by ploughing a dozen furrows, and with the people always alert, nobody was in serious danger. You may expect to see these flames in any direction any time before the end of February. By the time nearly everything outside the fire lines has been burned, the pine trees you might expect would easily catch fire, but they do not unless tapped or wounded, and tapped trees are always hoed about. So back to the universal ether goes all that vast mass of stuff that nature has woven of the air to add to the riches of the soil. It costs the state annually. It costs millions to the state annually, and the only object is to let a fresh growth of grass come up quickly to feed the range cattle that roam the woods. But even this is a false logic, for these wild pastures are yearly growing slimmer, and as they last through a shorter season. So it happens that range cattle are half starved in the winter and not unfrequently die for lack of food. The two things that Florida needs are a stock law and to stop the burning over her wildlands. You do not know the turpentine tappers, but if you come to Florida, you soon will find them out. It is a curious business that will deliberately destroy all the forest of half a dozen states for little immediate gain. And still more curious is the lassitude that allows the destruction to go on. The French have a method of tapping trees which gives a profitable return and leaves the trees practically uninjured. In this way, the industry is perpetuated, but our American tapping is another thing. The trees are cut with a broadaxe, hewing out great slices and leaving scars from which the resin flows into boxes at the bottom of the cut and is scraped once a month into casks. The cut is repeated each year, and in 6 or 7 years the tree is exhausted. So go great forests of pine that stand 80 to 100 feet high, leaving us thousands of acres of standing lumber, which will be cut down by portable sawmills. The end of it all is a haggard waste. The government in Georgia has instituted an investigation as to the more conservative methods, and I believe this is enforcing something of the kind in that state. The principle of the whole business is after the deluge. Georgia and Carolina are pretty nearly stripped of pine, and Florida is close after. Here's a picture of his lake.